There are times in life when you get caught up in something without realizing it, and tonight was one of those nights for me. Everything had started out normal, but there was a breaking point in it, an irreversible night. As I sipped my coffee in the kitchen, I jumped at the notification that popped up on my phone. It was a message from David. "I'm back in the office tonight. Work is really busy. I'll be home tomorrow night." Before I had even finished reading the sentence, a mixture of warmth and anger spread through me. A lie. I had gotten used to these messages by now. Each time he came up with a different excuse, but I knew the truth. There was no more us. David's mind and body belonged to someone else. I set my coffee cup down on the counter with a thud. I felt like I couldn't breathe. In this kitchen, in this house, in this marriage. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 43, but I was still beautiful. My tall, slender figure, my still striking curves, my slightly wavy auburn hair. And yet David's eyes were not on me. At that moment, a burst of laughter from the living room snapped me out of my thoughts. Caleb and Sam, my stepson and his best friend. They had been around a lot recently. Sam worked in his uncle's garage during the summer. He was skilled, a little reckless, but undeniably attractive with his strong hands, broad shoulders, and effortless confidence. He was the kind of man who, when I walked into the living room, Caleb was sprawled out on the game chair, and Sam had sunk his large frame into the couch. Both of them were glued to the screen, caught up in their competitive fun. For a moment, I watched Sam next to Caleb. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes, his sun-kissed arms, his easy smile. He was young, but he was a man. Attractive, yet unpredictable. I took a deep breath. "I'm going out," I said briefly. Caleb lifted his head slightly and looked at me. "At this hour?" I shrugged. "Yes." As I walked out, I felt Sam's brief glance at me, but I pretended I didn't notice. Something was stirring inside me, something I hadn't felt for a long time. I started the car and drove towards the city center. The sky had darkened, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and freedom. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but entering a bar didn't seem like a bad idea. I wanted to get lost in the crowd, forget who I was for a while. As I entered the bar, it was dimly lit. Soft music was playing in the background, mixed with the sound of laughter and conversation. I sat down at the bar and ordered a drink. As I took my first sip, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I felt relaxed. Finding myself here, sitting alone, not caring about the night, it was strange. But at the same time, I was letting something I had been suppressing come to the surface. After a while, I noticed the men around me looking at me. One of them leaned over, smiling as he tried to make conversation. "Are you here alone?" I lifted my eyes to him. He was a good-looking man, well-dressed, confident, but nothing stirred inside me. I smiled, but turned my head away, uninterested. Another tried to approach, but they were all the same, empty, unattractive. After a few hours in the bar, I stepped outside and made my way to my car. The cool night breeze brushed against my skin. I got into the car and turned the key to start the engine, but nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. My car wouldn't start. Cursing under my breath, I took out my mobile and called Caleb. "The car's broken down," I said simply. Caleb's voice sounded sleepy. "Are you serious? Where are you?" I gave my location. "Can you come and get me?" I heard some movement in the background. Then Sam's voice came through. "I'll do it, Caleb. Go back to sleep." I took a deep breath. Knowing that Sam was the one coming stirred something inside me, but I tried to suppress it. As I sat in my car waiting, the silence of the night surrounded me. But the real storm would begin when Sam arrived. If this is your first time hearing confessions like this, and you want to support us, join my channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Believe me, this story will be one of the most exciting for you. A few minutes later, headlights appeared at the corner of the road. Sam got out of the car and tapped on my window. When I rolled it down, he raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "I've never seen you like this before." he said with a slight smile. I was drunk. The teasing yet gentle tone in his voice made me laugh involuntarily. Is it so surprising? I asked, tilting my head slightly. Sam shrugged a little. But it's a nice change. After checking the car, he opened the bonnet. It's just the battery terminals that have come loose. Looks like the work of some troublemakers. That's why it wouldn't start. I raised my eyebrows. What about your car? You drove here, didn't you? Sam smiled nonchalantly. It's all right. You're drunk. I can't leave you like this. I'll pick you up tomorrow. We got into the car and drove off. After a few minutes of silence, I turned to him and asked, Sam, did you stay with us? Did I spoil your evening? Sam smiled faintly, keeping his eyes on the road. On the contrary, seeing you made me feel better. I couldn't sleep anyway, he said. When we got home, Sam parked the car and turned to me. Shall I make some coffee? I was tired, but his offer warmed something inside me. I nodded. Yeah, that would be nice. As Sam made the coffee in the kitchen, he turned to me. Elisa, why do you look so sad? His question echoed around the quiet kitchen. I lifted my head to look at him. There was curiosity in his eyes, but also sincerity. He really wanted to know how I was feeling. I sighed. My head was still spinning slightly, but something inside me had begun to unravel. I don't know, Sam, I said quietly. Or maybe I do, but I don't want to say. Sam put the coffee cup down on the counter, crossed his arms over his chest, and tilted his head slightly as he watched me. Don't do this to yourself, he said softly. It's obvious something is eating you up inside. I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It's not just one thing eating me up, Sam. It's a lot of things. Things that build up over time and eventually overflow. I guess tonight was that overflowing moment. At that moment, it felt strange to want to tell him so much, but the understanding in his eyes, the warmth in his voice, they urged me to speak. I took a deep breath and ran my fingers through my hair. David doesn't care anymore, I said, and as the words left my lips, a sense of relief washed over me. He doesn't care about me, about this house, about our marriage. He's been living in another world for a long time now, and I feel like I'm just hanging in the void. Sam nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. Is that why you went out tonight? I looked away. I don't know. Maybe. I just wanted to get lost, to be somewhere where no one knew me, where nothing defined me. Sam was silent for a few seconds, then gave a small smile. If you want to get lost, maybe what you really need is for someone to find you. At that moment, I felt something inside me unravel, but at the same time, I knew I had to suppress it. I shook my head and tried to stand up, but as I lost my balance, Sam quickly reached out and grabbed my arm. Just then, the kitchen door opened and Caleb walked in, his eyes heavy with sleep, his hair disheveled, rubbing his eyes. You're back, he said, yawning. Then he frowned as he looked at me. Elisa, are you okay? I smiled. I'm fine, Caleb. Just a bit drunk, that's all. Caleb furrowed his brow and looked at Sam, but Sam, in his usual casual way, just gave a small smile. It's all right, Caleb. I got her home and she'll be fine if she gets some rest, he said. Caleb sighed and nodded. All right then, Sam. Thank you. I'm going to bed. Good night. Good night, Sam replied. I gave Caleb a little wave and watched him go up to his room. When I heard the sound of his door closing, I couldn't help but smile. Caleb was always like that. He closed off his room and never let anyone in. When the room was quiet again, Sam turned to me. Shall I take you to your room? He asked, his voice low but firm. I stumbled as I tried to get to my feet, and everything happened so fast. I leaned against him, and his coffee cup tipped over, spilling the hot liquid directly onto his shirt. Ah, damn it, he muttered, tugging at his shirt slightly. I jumped, my eyes instinctively going to his now coffee-soaked t-shirt. The fabric clung to his chest, outlining the firm muscles beneath. I knew I should look away, but I couldn't. Sam looked at me with a slight smile. I think I need to change. I swallowed hard. Come on, there should be something in David's room. We can't go into Caleb's. He's locked it as usual, I said, an unintentional smile crossing my lips. We walked towards the bedroom together. As we walked, Sam put a light hand on my back to steady me, but that touch, it made me feel too much. As we entered David's room, I gently turned on the light and opened the wardrobe, pulling out a t-shirt. You can wear this, I said, but my voice was barely more than a whisper. As Sam took the shirt, he leaned slightly towards me, his eyes locked with mine. The distance between us was dangerously close. A moment of silence, but it was a silence filled with storms raging inside. Sam's hand brushed lightly across my wrist. Alyssa, he said in a low voice. Hearing that voice shattered something inside me, because I hadn't heard a voice like that from David in so long. I hadn't allowed a man to look at me like that for so long, but here I was, and I couldn't escape Sam's gaze. Sam looked away from me and shook his head slightly. It's nothing, he said, and started to take off his shirt. But I couldn't help the feeling that came over me as I watched his body, the strong muscles appearing right in front of my eyes. I realized I was losing control of something. As Sam moved to put the shirt on, a voice inside me told me to stop him, and I listened to that voice. Stop, I said, my voice soft but firm. Sam froze in mid-movement, his hands pressing the t-shirt to his chest as he looked at me. Why? He asked, a slight hesitation in his voice. Without looking away, I took a few steps closer. Fueled by the courage of alcohol, I broke free from the chains of emotions I had suppressed for so long. At the bar tonight, I said, keeping my eyes on his. Many handsome, successful men tried to talk to me. They were all trying to get my attention. Sam swallowed but said nothing. He just watched me. I took a deep breath and pushed myself forward. But none of them touched me the way you did, Sam. My words hung in the air. The silence of the room merged with the rhythm of our heartbeats. Sam's breathing had quickened, his eyes flickering away from mine, but at the same time betraying the battle he was fighting inside. I held his gaze. Tell me why. Sam parted his lips as if to speak, then closed them again. He looked as if he didn't know what to say, but the look in his eyes, it told me everything. Finally, he lowered his head slightly, his voice soft but firm. Because you've always been different from me, Alyssa. Something inside me snapped. The space between us had closed so much that I could feel his breath on my face. I didn't know where to put my hands. My mind was clouded, but at the same time I felt clearer than ever. Sam's hand touched my cheek gently. We shouldn't do this, he said, but his voice wasn't convincing. I closed my eyes and felt the warmth of his touch. But you want to, I whispered. And in that moment, Sam let go of all his hesitation. He lowered his head, and his lips came close to mine. And finally, without being able to hold back the emotions that had been building up inside me for years, he kissed me. His kiss was gentle at first, cautious, but when I didn't pull away, it deepened. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer. When I placed my fingers on his chest, I could feel the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath his muscles. This moment, this feeling, everything about it should have been so wrong, and yet it felt so right. We kissed until we were out of breath. But that was just the beginning. Sam's breath still lingered on my lips. The air between us was charged, and we had reached a point of no return. But suddenly, Sam pulled back, his eyes locked with mine, as if questioning what he had just done. Caleb, he whispered, his voice filled with concern, but also with the sparks of desire. I smiled and looked straight at him without blinking. In his room, I said, my breath still uneven. The door is locked. If it opens, we'll hear it. Sam hesitated for a moment. Then, as if another thought had just crossed his mind, he asked, David? I didn't look away as I smiled and shook my head confidently. He's not coming home tonight. As I said these words, I felt a strange lightness inside me. It was as if I had just broken the chains of a long captivity. Sam was staring at me, but now there was no hesitation in his eyes, only surrender. "We can lock the door too," I said, my voice low but carrying a clear invitation. Sam's pupils dilated. His breathing quickened. He paused for a few seconds, then reached out and slowly closed the door. The soft click of the lock echoed through the room, adding to the tension between us. But when he turned, his eyes landed on my dress lying on the floor. He lifted his head in surprise to find me lying on the bed. His eyes moved slowly over me, and I could feel him holding his breath. There was hesitation in his eyes, but also a desire he was struggling to suppress. I didn't move. I just watched him. "What are you going to do, Sam?" I asked, my voice deep and deliberate. At that moment, something inside Sam snapped. Without taking his eyes off me, he slowly moved forward. With steady steps, he approached the bed and put his knees on the mattress. As he leaned closer to my face, his eyes never left mine. There was almost no space between us. Then he whispered in a low, deep voice, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life." His words burned into my heart, spreading a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat. Sam leaned in even closer, and in that moment, time stood still. When I least expected it, I found my hands on Sam's back. I was drunk. My senses and cognition were very low, but I was sober enough to feel the enormity of what was inside me. It felt better than I could have imagined. I missed it, and the strangest thing was that I liked it more than I had ever felt before. It could have been the drug. It could have been Sam. It could have been his huge body. Sam was panting, looking so excited and red. It went on and on and on. At one point, my body was contracting like crazy. Despite all the alcohol, I made a loud noise. Sam got excited. I thought I should shut up, so I took a hand off Sam's back and put it over my mouth. Sam then closed his eyes. I felt his hands tighten, then his whole body. Finally, I said, "Don't be afraid and don't stop." Sam let go completely. I could feel it in Sam's reactions, along with the warmth inside me. He lay down next to me. As we talked about the beauty of what we had just experienced, exhaustion took over, and we both fell asleep. Time felt as if it had stood still. As the night wore on, I stirred slightly and opened my eyes. In the dim light of the room, I saw Sam sitting on the edge of the bed. He picked up his t-shirt from the floor and hesitated for a moment. I just watched. With soft, careful movements, he turned towards the door. I could guess what was going through his mind. He was making sure there was no risk of Caleb or David catching him. It was logical, but this wasn't just about logic. I smiled as Sam silently opened the door and stepped out. I whispered softly after him, "Sam, it wasn't just the alcohol." He stopped but didn't turn around. I continued, letting the certainty in my voice be heard. "I look forward to the days ahead. Wait for me." And then the door closed. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. If this is the first time you have heard confessions like this, and you want to support us, join my channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, this story will be one of the most exciting for you.